Hello, today is Wednesday, November 12th, and welcome to episode 526 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and I'm joined today by Executive Director Jamil Jaffer, Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, and Fellow Jessica Jones. Today, we are headed south to Venezuela, where yesterday the USS Gerald R carrier strike group arrived in the U.S. Southern Command Area of Operations, just north of the Caribbean Sea, as part of the Trump administration's campaign against drug cartels. The strike group includes 3 destroyers that will augment the 8 Navy surface ships already in the Southcom region. The sizable U.S. military presence in the region also includes a submarine, reconnaissance aircraft, 10 F-35 fighters, and Reaper drones. The Ford alone carries more than 60 aircraft. The carrier group's deployment to assist in operations against Latin American drug cartels was announced on October 24th, while it was on a port of call in Croatia. In response, the Maduro regime announced a massive military mobilization to the expanded U.S. defense presence in the region. According to Venezuela's defense minister, Vladimir Petrino Lopez, who, by the way, is the husband of Hugo Chavez's little sister, land, air, and naval reserve forces will carry out exercises through today in response to the quote-unquote imperialist threat. Things are heating up in the neighborhood. So, Jamil, starting with you. What are the objectives for the USS Gerald R? Why is it deployed to the Caribbean? And frankly, this is our most advanced carrier. Why was it selected for this theater rather than a smaller platform?
Well, look, I think part of the Ford coming to this region right now is it's just the closest. It was the one that was least needed where it was. I mean, port visits to Croatia, this is probably a more effective use if, in fact, the president's going to continue to prosecute drug targets using military platforms. So, look, I mean, the goal here is simple, right? Restrict drug trafficking in the Caribbean and stop the flow of drugs up from the southern border. The problem, of course, is we're not using those drones and those aircraft and the aircraft carrier battle group in the primary route in for drugs, which is not by sea but by land through Mexico. Now, President Trump has cut a deal with the Chinese, ostensibly to limit the flow of fentanyl into Mexico, and then hopefully that'll limit some of that drugs coming across that border. But look, I mean, the fact is when you put an aircraft carrier battle group anywhere in the world, it projects American power, it demonstrates that we're serious and we mean business, and President Trump wants to send a message. We mean business about this drug trafficking problem. And by the way, in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, we mean business too. Get your stuff together. Otherwise, we might be coming for you next. Now, Maduro, for his part, has said, look, bring it. I know my military forces aren't a match for you, but we'll withdraw into hiding. We'll do what the Iraqi military did, and we'll come out and make you suffer a significantly painful, guerrilla war. And so that's his plan. In the meantime, by the way, the UK has shut off intelligence sharing with us because they think our counter drug strikes are illegal, as has Colombia. And as you know, we spent a lot of time with Colombia and Plan Colombia to limit cocaine trafficking from that country. So that's not a great outcome there either. So we'll see what happens. But going forward, the Gerald Ford definitely sends a loud message.
Mm-hmm. So, Jess, drug traffickers in the Caribbean, especially those that we've neutralized. By the way, we've conducted 20-some strikes and killed, a few dozen, around 77 alleged traffickers. They are not operating the most exquisite or sophisticated naval vessels. Is this literally overkill?
Short answer seems like yes. Clearly, like Jamil pointed out, this is more about messaging than the effectiveness of, to your point, neutralizing narco terrorists. If it was really about stopping drug cartels, land routes, you go over financial networks, the banks, the shell corporations, they're actually channeling the money where the real power is. It's not these guys driving these boats, right? To Jamil's point, this is about messaging to Maduro that we can come and get you. We're right offshore. And it's also part of, I think, the president's foreign policy, which is also kind of a guessing game, right? It's a feature, not a bug. You're wondering what President Trump is planning. On the one hand, last week, President Trump talked about authorizing CIA covert operations in and around Venezuela. He's obviously labeled Maduro a narco terrorist. There's a $50 million bounty on him. But he also told Congress, Secretary of State told Congress last week that the U.S. doesn't have legal authority to do strikes within Venezuela. So there's a little bit of a guessing game of what the administration is really planning to do, but it's clear that they're keeping their option. They're signaling to Venezuela they're going to keep their options open and that they should be worried.
Yeah. So, Les, Jamil used some really escalatory language here. He's like guerrilla warfare in the streets of Caracas, and references to Iraq. I mean, is that where we're headed here? Is this really the message that we're trying to send to Maduro and the Venezuelan armed forces, that we're gonna launch a complete regime change?
Well, there's a lot of different messages being sent by the Trump administration, and they're not all coherent or they're not all congruent with each other. Sometimes we're saying we're going to do we might do land operations. Other times the president says, actually, I'm not considering that. Sometimes they're saying we're considering getting rid of Maduro. Sometimes they're saying we're not considering that. What we have seen, as everyone has pointed out, are these strikes on alleged gunboat traffickers, narco traffickers going across the water, presumably to bring nefarious things to our population. And another quick reminder here: in the first Trump administration, there was also a run at putting a ton of pressure on the Maduro regime and pushing for regime change. John Bolton led that effort. It amounted to not much. So I presume that in some sort of rational way, this administration is not going down the same road and hoping for the same result, because it didn't work. Nothing actually happened. There's a different thing going on here. I suspect it's being led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who we know has a deep understanding and interest in Venezuela. Venezuela is, in fact, a very bad actor in the region. It is a platform for the Russians, the Chinese, the Cubans, the Iranians. It's the locus of bad guys. And if you had regime change there, you would likely be looking at some kind of pressure on Havana to also change. So there's reasons to be interested in this. And as Jamil points out, there's reasons to be very cautious too. This is not like Panama. People are talking about this being like Panama in 1989. U.S. troops were already in Panama for that regime change, which was the U.S. government described as a police action. This in Venezuela, we do not have troops in Venezuela. So that's why you're seeing this massing of forces outside of Venezuela to possibly act. It's a different scenario. It is not as clean cut an operation. It would seem to be not as clean cut an operation as Panama was. So it could be very fraught, which makes me wonder, are we talking to people inside Venezuela to possibly take over for Maduro and have some sort of handover, or we'd end up working with a new government there, whether it's military or otherwise? The idea of getting Maria Corina Machado in power, who is the fairly elected leader of that country in many ways. So there's a lot to pay attention to here too. I don't think the administration's made I don't think the president has made a decision about what he's going to do. I think he's saving that for the very end. I don't think anyone actually knows what the ultimate result here is going to be. So we should all be paying close attention.
Yeah, and to be clear, it would take a lot more forces in the region to actually invade Venezuela and take over that country. We don't have that footprint there. Even with the carrier battle group there, that's not enough. But we're certainly sending the message. I mean, B-1B bombers and B-2 bombers, nuclear-capable bombers flying off the coast of Venezuela, that, when combined with the carrier battle group, sends a very distinct message.
Yep. All right, y'all, that's a wrap. Thanks as always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, November 14th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode and NSI swag. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.